Tonight, I invite you to loosen your grip on the day that has passed, to sink softly into the folds of time, where marble columns stand tall against a sky heavy with thunder, and the quiet rustle of olive groves whispers secrets of forgotten ages. Close your eyes, if you wish, and imagine yourself standing on a sun-bleached slope somewhere in ancient Greece. Far above, the shimmering heights of Mount Olympus pierce the drifting clouds, a kingdom hidden from mortal eyes, yet ever watchful. Below, the earth hums with the footsteps of farmers and poets, of merchants and kings, all living beneath the silent, unyielding gaze of Zeus. In this story, we drift not among the grand temples and heroic feasts alone, but into the hidden spaces where power is kept and punishment is certain. Here, strength has shape and name. Kratos and Bia, the quiet instruments of might, their shadows long and cold. As you listen, feel the rhythm of a world where to defy a god was to vanish into mist and myth. Let each moment unfold slowly. Imagine you wake just before dawn, your head resting on a coarse linen pillow, your eyes blinking open to the hush of a humble stone dwelling perched on a hillside. The air is cool, still heavy with the scent of last night's hearth fire. Faint curls of ash and olive wood smoke drifting through the single open window. Outside, the world stirs. Somewhere, a rooster calls to the sun still hidden behind distant hills. In this ancient village, your world is small. Yet even here, the presence of Zeus wraps around you like an invisible chain. Every harvest, every birth, every rainfall is a transaction, a quiet negotiation with a sky that may favor you or choose to punish. You slip from your blanket and step barefoot onto the hard-packed earth floor. The chill bites at your... Now, let us step away from the soft clatter of daily life, the hens scratching, the goats' low bleat, the careful murmurs of farmers tending vines under the sun's patient gaze. Let us turn our eyes upward, toward the hidden heights where power does not rest, but stands watchful, unblinking, among the gleaming halls of Olympus, where immortal feet leave no mark upon polished marble. Two shadows linger near the Thunderer's throne, silent, steady, and ever loyal. They are not worshipped with garlands of laurel or sweet-honeyed wine. No poets sing their praises at feasts, yet they are there, as constant as the crackle of storm clouds gathering behind Zeus's broad brow. Kratos' strength made flesh, Bia, the spirit of force, his sister, quiet as a blade's edge just before it strikes. Children of Styx, the river that binds even the gods to their promises, and Pallas, the Titan who once ruled before the new order rose. When Zeus called for loyalty in the wake of the Titanomachi, that thunderous war that tore the sky and earth apart, it was Styx who answered first, bringing her children with her. And so, strength and force stood by Zeus's side, as he forged his reign from lightning and oath. They did not flinch when their hands were called to bind the mighty Prometheus to cold rock and endless sky. They did not question when Hephaestus's chains burned hot on the anvil. They did not tremble when their master's voice cracked like a storm over the mountains. Imagine them now, Kratos tall, broad-shouldered, his face carved from the same stern granite as the peaks themselves. In his eyes, no flicker of pity, no moment of doubt. In myth, he is not given long speeches, no stirring soliloquy of regret. His words are few, sharp as iron, final as a locked door. Beside him be a force, unspoken. Her presence is less a shout, more a hush that fills the space between commands and compliance. When Kratos orders, she acts. When Zeus decrees, she ensures. Their loyalty is not the loyalty of soft hearts, it is the loyalty of unbreakable chains, forged from necessity and ancient allegiance. To the Greeks, they were not gods to be worshipped, but realities to be accepted, harsh truths dressed in mortal shape. When your father warned you not to curse the sky, when your mother hushed your complaints as the storm clouds rolled over the fields, it was Kratos they feared. Bia they felt at their shoulders when silence was the wiser path. Prometheus knew them well, felt their hands grasp his arms, drag him across jagged rock to the lonely peak where his rebellion would be pinned forever. Hephaestus, the reluctant smith, struck the final rivets, but it was Kratos who barked the command to pull them tight, and Bia who held the Titans steady while the weight of Zeus's wrath was hammered home. No prayer can soften them. No sacrifice of honey or doves will turn their gaze aside. They are the teeth behind the smile of Olympus, the hush that follows thunder. And yet, as you listen, do not fear them too deeply, for Kratos and Bia are part of the balance, a reminder that even among the immortals, order must be kept by force when trust alone falters. Without them, the world would drift into chaos once more, and the fragile lives of mortals, your fields, your hearth, your quiet sleep, would be swept away in the flood. Picture them again, these two quiet sentinels of Olympus, standing apart from the feasting gods, whose laughter echoes through marble halls, scented with roasted meat and spilled wine. Kratos and Bia do not join the revels. They do not lift golden goblets or scatter rose petals in Dionysian delight. Instead, they stand in the shadow of Zeus's great throne, unmoving, the stillness in the room when laughter dies away. Some poets whispered that when Kratos passed, lesser gods lowered their eyes, not from hatred, but from the uncomfortable reminder that strength, when summoned, has no softness left to share. And Bia, she who holds her silence like a blade sheathed just beneath the skin, needed no words to be understood. Her presence alone was a promise that no order would go unfulfilled, no chain left unfastened. If you could stand at the foot of Olympus, far below the golden palaces, among wind-swept pines and the rattle of cypress branches, you might feel them, even there, as a hush before the thunder breaks. For their reach does not stop at the cloud-wreathed gates. It drifts down, woven into stories told beside flickering hearths. It travels on the lips of old men who mutter warnings to reckless boys. It lives in the eyes of mothers who hush their daughters before they speak too freely of storms and defiance. Long ago, when the Titanomachy roared across heaven and earth, the world split open under the clash of Titans and Olympians. Mountains cracked, seas boiled, and the sky itself trembled with the cries of a world being torn from the old order and bound to the new. And when the final clash faded, it was not only Zeus's thunderbolt that crowned him ruler of all, but also the unwavering loyalty of Kratos and Bia, who chained rebellion where it dared to linger. In the great tragedy of Prometheus Bound, they appear only briefly, yet their presence echoes through every line of that cold mountain scene. Hephaestus, with his hammer and forge-scorched hands, soft-hearted enough to pity Prometheus, hesitates before locking the final shackle. But Kratos does not hesitate. He reminds the smith that mercy has no place when the king's will has spoken. Each rivet driven into Titan flesh is not simply iron, but the embodiment of Zeus's word made unbreakable. It is this unyielding aspect that makes them so quietly fearsome. and strangely comforting too. For in their rigid obedience lies a certainty mortals can lean upon. So long as Kratos and Bia stand guard, the cosmos remains in its proper shape. The sun rises when Helios calls it forth. The seasons turn at Demeter's bidding. Fire remains a blessing, not a threat, so long as no one dares to steal it again. And so, each time you pour oil at a simple household altar, each time you murmur a prayer to keep your roof unstruck by Zeus's wayward lightning, you are also acknowledging them, the silent watchers who ensure that the world you know does not unravel in the night. Somewhere beyond sight, in the hush between a distant thunderclap and the moment the rain begins, they wait, strength and force. Siblings born of oath-bound rivers and old Titan blood, forever keeping the king's promise alive. So rest a moment longer here in their shadow, feeling how order hums beneath the chaos of storms. How chains hold fast where rebellion once roared. How Kratos and Bia stand eternal in a world shaped by thunder and fear. Imagine, if you will, a mountain at the very edge of the known world. A lonely peak where snow gathers in secret drifts and icy winds carry whispers no mortal ear can ever quite catch. This is where Prometheus waits, bound in silence, held fast by chains forged in divine fire, clasped shut by strength and force, Kratos and Bia, and overseen by Zeus's unblinking command. Long before you tended your simple hearth, before your ancestors gathered round a crackling flame to warm their hands or bake coarse bread on a flat stone, there was no fire among mortals. Flames belonged to the gods alone, a jealously guarded secret flickering on Olympus. A privilege reserved for divine halls where ambrosia simmered and torches gleamed in endless feasts. But Prometheus, whose name means forethought, looked down from the heights and saw humankind shivering in the dark. He watched as they stumbled through cold nights, afraid of beasts they could not see, unable to tame the wild world around them. He pitied them, these fragile creatures who offered prayers but received no spark in return. And so, in secret, he climbed the hidden paths of Olympus, stealing fire from the hearth of the gods. Some say he hid it in a hollow reed. Some say he carried a glowing ember cupped gently in his Titan palm. However it was done, the result was the same. The first human hearth crackled to life. Shadows fled, wolves stayed back, and slowly, carefully, civilization took its first quiet steps forward. But nothing taken from Olympus goes unnoticed for long. Zeus, king of the sky, heard the whispers on the wind, betrayal crackling in the embers of 1,000 mortal fires. His wrath did not fall with sudden thunderbolts. Instead, it settled coldly into a plan, punishment that would echo through ages as a warning to any who might dream of defiance. And so Prometheus was brought in chains to the barren heights of the Caucasus Mountains. There, Kratos and Bi did what pity would not allow softer hands to finish. They dragged the Titan across cold rock, slick with drifting mist. They stood firm as Hephaestus, the reluctant craftsman, riveted iron into immortal flesh. They silenced Prometheus's protests, not with cruelty for cruelty's sake, but with the steady, unblinking certainty that order must be kept at any cost. Bound to the mountain, Prometheus could neither move nor die. Each day, the sky above him stretched endless and pitiless, while below, humankind thrived by the warmth he had given them. But every gift demands a price in stories such as these. For his theft, an eagle came Zeus's chosen torment to feed upon Prometheus's ever-regenerating body. Day after day, the wings beat softly against cold stone, the shadow fell across snow and chain, and the cycle began anew. Yet beneath this cruel circle, there lay a quiet defiance that Zeus could not fully erase. Even bound in iron, Prometheus's gift to humankind could not be returned to the gods. The warmth remained. Hearth fires still flickered in the smallest huts, and in their flickering, the memory of the Titan's sacrifice survived. When villagers spoke softly over the flames at night, when they gathered round embers for warmth and story, they spoke of Prometheus, and though they feared Kratos's iron grip and Bia's silent presence, they also cherished the secret spark the Titan had stolen for them, hidden forever from Olympus's jealous grasp. High on that lonely crag, the world narrows to wind and stone. Prometheus, once a Titan who stood shoulder to shoulder with the oldest forces of the earth, now lies pinned like a stubborn root beneath a boulder. The cold mountain mist curls around him at dawn and dusk, clinging to his battered shape as the seasons wheel endlessly above. Sometimes, they say, when the wind is just right, his voice drifts down the slopes, not cries of pain alone, but words woven with fragments of foresight and riddles that echo in the ears of those who dare to listen. For Prometheus, even in chains, holds secrets. He knows that Zeus's reign, forged by thunder and held by Kratos's unyielding grip, is not forever. Somewhere, far down the coiling path of time, change will come, though whether by cunning strength or some quiet unraveling, none can say for certain. It is this quiet flicker of rebellion, burning at the heart of Prometheus's torment, that sets his punishment apart. The Greeks understood well that chains could bind the body, but never silence every whisper of dissent. And so Kratos's iron, Bia's force, the relentless eagle's wings, all these were reminders that order is never without cost. Beneath Olympus's bright halls, a hidden economy of fear and strength hums like a low note under the songs of feasts and victories. Below the mountain, far from the harsh winds that strip bark from the few stubborn trees, mortals gather at their hearths. The flames that Prometheus gifted dance on simple logs, olive, pine, cypress, cracked open by careful hands and fed by the breath of farmers and shepherds. Each flicker is a soft defiance, a small, trembling statement that they too hold a spark that does not belong to the gods. And still, above them, the mountain stands. Kratos's work endures. Bia's silence lingers. The eagle circles, descends, departs, only to return again as the sun rises and falls. Let us leave the lonely peak behind now, the sound of the wind slipping away as we descend gently into the calm air that wraps itself around Olympus's gleaming halls. Here, above the worries of mortal life, the gods speak in murmurs and laughter that roll like distant thunder over the land below, and at the edge of these bright corridors walks a quieter figure, her name whispered in poems, etched in stone, yet rarely noticed in the flicker of daily prayers. Her name is Nike, victory given shape and wings, a sister to Kratos and Bia, born of the river Styx's unwavering loyalty. Nike does not bind or strike or hold. She drifts just behind Zeus's throne, a reminder that strength and force alone are blunt tools without triumph to polish their edge. To the Greeks, Nike was not merely a winged woman gliding through marble friezes. She was the hush that settles after battle when the last spear falls. She was the gentle swell of pride in a general's chest as he returned home draped in garlands and oaths of thanks, where Kratos's grip could crush defiance. Nike's soft touch lifted the hearts of armies, stitched banners with hope, and crowned the victors who fought beneath Olympus's favor. If you listen carefully, you might hear her wings, not the harsh beating of an eagle's hunt, but the soft brush of feathers stirring air that tastes of laurel leaves and bronze dust. She flits from camp to camp, battlefield to quiet council hall, a promise that with loyalty and courage, triumph will not remain out of reach. Yet Nike, like her siblings, serves Zeus first. Her favor does not drift freely from mortal to mortal on the whims of ambition alone. It is bound by oath, by the same river that gave birth to strength and force. When the Titanomachy raged, when Titans hurled mountains and fire at the upstart Olympians, Nike's wings carried victory to Zeus's side. She was the secret breath of wind that turned arrows aside, the sudden swell of courage in the hearts of those who would hold the line just one moment longer. Imagine now an ancient city, marble colonnades gleaming in the heat of midday, dust rising from the trample of sandals, the soft chant of poets singing praise. At the city's highest point, a small temple waits in Nike's honor, not grand like the Parthenon or the sprawling sanctuaries of Zeus himself, but elegant, perched high so that her wings might brush the sky. Here, warriors, returning from distant campaigns, lay down wreaths and whisper gratitude that her presence rode with them through fear and chaos. To common folk, Nike's shadow was less visible than Zeus's thunder or Kratos's hush of punishment. Yet she moved among them all the same, in the proud tilt of a farmer's head when his field yielded more grain than expected, in the satisfied hush of a merchant whose risky voyage returned him safely with silks and stories. But victory always comes with a cost, for in the world the Greeks shaped with myth and memory, triumph is never free of consequence. One city's victory is another's ruin. A crown woven with olive leaves rests uneasily upon a head that must wonder how long the favor of Olympus will last. And so Nike remains near, a soft presence that can be felt but never grasped, her wings brushing the marble steps where Zeus sits surrounded by the cold certainty of Kratos and Bia. Where they enforce, she rewards. Where they bind, she lifts. Together, they hold the delicate balance of fear and hope, force and favor, punishment and praise. If you stand still in the hush before dawn, when the fields lie silvered in dew, and the cocks have not yet called the sun from its sleep, you might feel her there, Nika, her wings brushing lightly across the threshold between sleep and waking. She does not linger where crowds shout their praises too loudly, nor where kings boast too boldly of their triumphs. Instead, she drifts where the promise of victory trembles on the edge of doubt. In the stories that wound their way through marble porticos and sun-baked courtyards, Nike's presence often arrived not at the clashing of swords, but at the quiet moment just before, when a single heartbeat could decide which shield would shatter, which line would hold, to the hoplite standing shield to shield in the press of a phalanx. Her breath was the courage that steadied his trembling legs, to the rower bent over his oar on the black waves of the Aegean. Her whisper was the wind that filled the sail when all seemed lost, and when battle fell silent, she alone could crown the living with wreaths of olive bay or laurel. In painted scenes on the walls of old pottery, you might see her perched on the outstretched hand of Athena, for wisdom and victory often walk side by side. Her wings, always open, never stay long in one place. She is both promise and warning that what is gained today may slip away tomorrow, if the will of Olympus turns. In the humbler corners of the Greek world, where stone villages crouch beside the patient sea, Nike's name was not always spoken aloud. Instead, her presence drifted through quiet gestures, a sprig of fresh olive left at a wayside shrine, a silent prayer murmured before a foot race, a small statue placed at the stern of a fishing boat that must brave the fickle moods of Poseidon's waves. If you close your eyes now, you might imagine the hum of a distant city, Athens, perhaps on a day bright with banners and the dull clang of bronze shields stacked in victory, on a gentle hill above the city's beating heart. The temple of Athena, Nike, stands small but proud, its marble steps worn smooth by countless feet, its columns catching the sea's salt-laden breeze. Here, the people came not just to thank the goddess of wisdom, but to honor the winged promise that wisdom could bring, a promise that conflict, rightly guided, could end in triumph rather than ruin. Yet, for all her grace and soft touch, Nike's loyalty is never yours alone to claim. Like her siblings Kratos and Bia, she answers first to the throne atop Olympus. It is Zeus's favor she seals with her wreaths. It is his power she quietly confirms when a city wins its war or an empire expands its reach across distant coasts. To the poets, she was inspiration made, feathered, and fleeting. To generals, she was the final piece of armor, invisible but heavier than any bronze corselet. And to ordinary souls, whose lives flickered briefly between harvests and hearths, she was a soft reminder that sometimes, just sometimes, the hard path bends toward triumph, if the gods will it so. Yet in this world, where thunder decides and chains hold steady, even victory must bow to force. Nike lifts the worthy skyward, but only so far as the hands of Kratos and Bia allow. Should loyalty waver, should arrogance swell too high, her wings fold quietly away, leaving only silence where shouts of triumph once rose. So tonight, as you lie within your blanket's gentle fold, you may feel her presence, not as the roar of crowds, but as the hush that comes after effort well spent, the soft certainty that somewhere beyond the marble columns and drifting clouds, a winged figure watches, patient and impartial, reminding kings and common folk alike that every victory. Now let us drift downward, far below Olympus's bright marble steps, past the soft shadows of temples where oil lamps flicker through the night, down, down into the deep, hidden places of the world where rivers run black as midnight oil, waters that hum with a quiet, terrible power no torchlight can pierce. Here flows the Styx, a river older than the Olympians, older even than Zeus's first thunderbolt, a boundary and a binding. Styx is not just a stream winding through the underworld. She is a goddess, cold and absolute, whose children, Kratos, Baia, Nike, and Zeus, bear her essence in their unyielding loyalty. It is said that when the Titanomachy split the heavens and cracked the earth, Zeus sought allies among the old powers that came before him. Some titans refused, some fell in battle, but Styx, the river herself, answered the new king's call. She rose from her hidden bed and brought her children to stand beside the Thunderer's fledgling throne. Imagine Styx now, her dark surface unbroken, yet beneath it coil secrets older than language. Her waters do not babble like a mountain brook. They do not dance in sunlight like mortal rivers. They move in silence, heavy and slow, carrying whispers of the oaths sworn above them. For in this world of myth, promises are not mere words. A vow sworn by the Styx carries weight enough to bind even Zeus himself. Should an immortal break that oath, should a god speak falsely with Styx's name upon his tongue, the punishment is swift and severe. For 9 long years, the liar must lie voiceless, breathless, shut out from the councils of the gods, a ghost in marble halls where no welcome waits. This ancient fear gave Styx her power, a cold certainty that even the highest must bow before truth when her name is spoken. She is the hidden iron in Zeus's rule, the hush that follows every promise made on Olympus. When Kratos clasps a chain shut, when Baia's silent presence stills all protest, they do so not with brute force alone, but with the quiet authority of their mother's vow. In distant villages where her name is only half remembered, some say that Styx's waters seep through cracks in hidden caves, cold and bitter to the tongue, tasting faintly of stone and secrets. No mortal dared drink from her current, for to swallow a mouthful of Styx was to invite ruin, to bind your own breath to truths you might wish you'd never spoken. Yet still, her gifts endure. In the soft hush before dawn, when you whisper a promise to yourself, to return home, to mend a rift, to keep a secret safe, somewhere in the deep folds of old memory, the Styx stirs, not to punish, but to remind that loyalty is not only fear, but choice, a quiet strength flowing unseen beneath words. And so tonight, as you listen, remember that Kratos' iron hand and Baia's steady hush were not born of cruelty alone. They were shaped by a mother whose waters remind all who rule, even gods crowned with thunder, that power must be bound by something deeper than force, that a promise kept is stronger than marble, and an oath sworn true hums in the silence like a hidden current beneath the world. Listen more closely, if you can, to the hush where the Styx flows, far beneath the marble temples, the fields of mortal toil, the soft crackle of Prometheus's stolen fire. Down here, the world is quiet and cold, where the living do not linger, a place for shadows and promises too heavy to carry in the sunlight. To the Greeks, the Styx was more than water. It was the chill that settles at the edge of truth, the fine thread that stitched together power and trust. Imagine now a time before calm temples, before farmers laid neat furrows into the earth, or poets carved verses into soft wax tablets. Imagine the world as a vast, shifting plain. Mountains not yet settled where they stand, seas still restless with the breath of old, wild titans. The air hums with a promise of order, yet chaos rattles beneath every stone. This was the age of the Titanomachy, the great war that split the sky from the earth, a clash so vast that even the stars, it was said, paused in their cold drifting to watch. At its heart rose Zeus, youngest son of Cronos, the Titan who devoured his own children to keep his throne from trembling. Freed from his father's belly by cunning and quiet alliances, Zeus gathered siblings and bold promises like flint and dry grass. He spoke of a new order, an Olympus crowned with thunder, not fear. Yet his promise alone could not hold back the weight of titans older than oceans, stronger than iron, stubborn as mountain roots. In that moment of reckoning, Zeus turned to those whose loyalty was bound not by charm or threats, but by the hush of Styx's vow. And so came the river goddess herself, black current flowing through the cracks of the world, to stand beside him, her children at her heels. Kratos and Bia, strength and force, stood as living walls at Zeus's side, never flinching when the earth cracked under the Titan's rage. Nike, wings bright in the dust and roar of battle, drifted wherever the clash grew fiercest, lifting courage like a torch passed hand to hand, and zealous rivalry incarnate hissed through the ranks like wildfire, stoking ambition and pride that held new gods upright when the old ones thundered down upon them. Imagine the clash, not the clash of blood and blade that poets might later paint in bright, stirring colors, but the deep, grinding push of mountain against mountain. Titans hurling boulders large enough to dam rivers, storms rolling in endless waves as Zeus's lightning split the sky, seas rising in furious swells as Poseidon's trident churned depths never meant to see the sun. And in this chaos, the children of Styx moved like iron threads stitched through wild cloth. Kratos braced the lines where lesser gods might have fled. Bia pressed forward when doubt threatened to seep into the cracks of courage. Nike drifted overhead, a hush of wings, reminding each god who fought that the promise of victory hovered close. If they did not break, it was not a short war. 10 long years the world shuddered beneath the weight of old power and the ambition of the new. Forests burned, valleys rose into hills and fell again into plains. Rivers carved fresh paths through ground churned by the steps of beings too vast for mortal eyes to measure. At last the Titans faltered, not because they were weaker in body, but because the promise that bound Styx's children to Zeus held stronger than fear or muscle alone. They chained the fallen, one by one, Prometheus's kin, Atlas, with shoulders wide enough to shoulder the sky itself, Cronos, the devourer, brought low by the sun he thought forever lost. When the final roar faded, the world settled into new shapes. Olympus crowned in cloud and marble, the Titans cast down into Tartarus's echoing darkness, Kratos and Bia standing silent in the hush that follows thunder. For mortals yet to be born, this war would become a myth, a soft echo folded into old stories told beside the warmth of a hearth. But for those who fought and bound and vowed, the Titanomachy was the furnace that forged the shape of things to come. It taught the gods that strength without loyalty is a crumbling wall, that force without promise is a blade turned inward, that even thunder needs iron chains and whispered oaths to hold fast. Listen a little longer, if you wish, to the thunder that never fully faded. In the hush between your own slow breaths, you might imagine what the earth felt when titans clashed with thunderers above the tree line, when mountains were unmade and rivers were forced to find new beds in the torn soil. The Titanomachy was not a single roaring battle, but many small tempests braided together, skirmishes hidden in shadowed ravines, ambushes that flickered in the dark beneath flickering lightning, long waits in the hush before another storm broke. Imagine Kratos now, not as a roaring warlord swinging bronze and iron, but as an immovable shape amid the storm, where Zeus cast his thunder and Poseidon churned the seas. Kratos stood at the lines that threatened to buckle, the quiet, heavy presence that held lesser gods steady when ancient fear pressed them to flee. In the swirl of storm winds and rolling earth, his hands were iron hinges on which the door of Olympus would either swing open or slam shut forever. Bia, force itself, moved beside him. Never a roar, always a push. At just the moment strength alone was not enough. She is there in the tightening of a grip on a spear, the hush of feet digging deeper into rocky ground, the way even a god might find new resolve in the simple knowledge that force stands quietly behind his shoulder. And above them, Nike drifted on the wind, her wings stirring the taste of laurel and dust. She settled where resolve wavered, a brush of victory at the corner of a trembling mind, a whisper that even against beings as old as ocean trenches, triumph could be coaxed closer with loyalty and courage bound together. The Titans, older than language, rose from caves and valleys that had not yet felt the plow. Their roars rolled through forests that would one day become olive groves and marble temples. They hurled whole mountains like stones, cracked the roots of the earth until the rivers changed their songs. And still, through it all, the children of Styx held the fragile promise of a new order together. The poets later sang of Zeus's thunderbolt, how it cracked open the night sky, how it blazed, bright as summer noon. But beneath that blaze was the hush of Kratos' steady hand, Bia's unyielding push, the hush of force and strength working where thunder alone could not reach. When the Titans fell, weary and broken by a war that no longer answered to their ancient certainty, it was Kratos and Bia who bound them. Iron rings forged in Hephaestus' fires, oaths murmured in the hush of Styx's cold flow. Atlas bent beneath the sky's wide weight. Prometheus's own chain waited quietly on the anvil. Kronos, who once swallowed time itself, silenced by a binding stronger than hunger or fear. The battlefield grew silent, dust drifting across broken stones, where once the world cracked open. In that silence, the new gods lifted their eyes to a sky that for the first time did not tremble in fear of Titans. Olympus rose, bright and terrible, its marble crowns built on the hush beneath thunder. Imagine now that the dust of the Titanomachy has barely settled. The new gods sit upon their marble thrones. Zeus's lightning hums softly above the peaks of Olympus. The rivers run new paths, carrying away the last echoes of the Titans' roars. Mortals have begun to whisper their first timid prayers upward, hoping the new order will keep the old wildness at bay. Yet the earth remembers. Deep beneath the olive roots and the marble columns rising under bright sun, Gaia, the ancient earth herself, feels the iron bindings pressing her Titan children into Tartarus's cold gloom. She feels the hush of Kratos' chains, the hush that pins Prometheus, Atlas, Kronos, her own sons. And in her deep, endless patience, a new thought stirs, like roots pushing up through stone. And so the giants come forth, not titans, but born of the earth's old heart, massive and wild, shapes of raw stone and tangled roots, hair bristling like pine forests, voices rumbling like landslides down mountainsides. They rise where the cracks in the world still breathe hot from volcanoes and hidden rifts, places where the old wildness waits for an unguarded moment. The Gigantamachi, the Giants' War, is not so long as the Titanomachi, but in many ways it is sharper, a reminder that no new order stands unchallenged forever. The giants do not come with oaths or promises. They rise with stones torn from cliff faces, with burning branches plucked from forested slopes. They roar at Olympus, not with ancient claim, but with raw hunger to tear marble down and let wild soil swallow the polished steps of the gods. And again, Zeus calls upon the hush beneath his thunder. Kratos and Bia stand ready, unblinking in the cold dawn before the clash. Nike circles overhead, wings brushing the dust of broken hills, reminding the gods who watch from behind high walls that victory is never granted, only kept through unbroken loyalty. Some say the clash of giants and Olympians tore the edge of heaven once more. Trees splintered like dry twigs beneath giant feet. Rivers turned black with ash as mountains cracked open, bleeding molten rock into the sea. In the hush between roars, the gods gathered. Athena, spear bright and eyes cold as moonlight. Heracles, mortal-born yet woven into the gods' line by fate and Zeus's hidden design. But even heroes and war gods do not stand alone. It is Kratos and Bia who hold the lines that must not break, their presence a simple, silent barrier, where the giants surge up slopes, slick with rain and fallen stone. Kratos braces lesser gods whose courage flickers under the giants' thunderous bellow. Where one god falters, Bia presses close, her force not a shout but an unyielding push to hold the wall. And high above, Nike glides on the shifting winds, trailing hope like a whisper of laurel leaves drifting down upon battered bronze helms. Each time the giants claw closer to Olympus's bright gates, the hush of force, strength, rivalry, and victory binds the gods tighter than marble ever could. At last, the giants fall. Some are buried beneath landslides of rock and soil, mountains raised over their restless shapes. Some sink into the sea, their cries bubbling away into salt and silence. And some, the poets say, still shift in uneasy dreams beneath the crust of the world, their anger rising sometimes in the rumble of earthquakes. A reminder that the old wildness is never gone, only sleeping. When the last bellow fades, the hush returns. The gods stand once more unchallenged, Olympus gleaming under cloud-swept sky, and Kratos, Bia, Nike, the children of Styx, stand a little closer to Zeus's throne, their silent loyalty more precious than ever. A whisper that reminds even the thunderer that force and oaths together hold the fragile line between order and the chaos waiting just beneath the soil. Stay here a moment longer in the hush between thunder and trembling earth. Listen to the way the old poets told it, that the Gigantamachi was not just a war, but a rumble beneath every hill, a memory stitched into the roots of every pine that clings stubbornly to a crumbling slope. When the giants rose, they did not come all at once, but in slow, restless waves, like old tree stumps cracking open under frost, or boulders splitting as rainwater creeps through hidden seams. Gaia's anger did not roar outright. It hummed at first, a tremor beneath the feet of shepherds on lonely hillsides, a soft quake that rattled amphorae on dusty storeroom shelves. The earth itself stretched and cracked, as if trying to loosen the marble crown Zeus had pressed onto it. And so the giants stirred, shapes half stone, half fruit, half memory of the world, before thrones and columns. Some rose where mountains had split under old storms. Some clambered up from hidden ravines, thick with brambles and the scent of damp churning soil. Their voices, when they gathered, rolled across plains like distant thunder, but deeper, older, carrying the hush of Gaia's buried heartbeat. Mortals felt their presence, even if they never glimpsed a single massive shape. They heard it in the sudden shiver of trees on windless nights, in the low moan of hillsides shifting just beyond the plowed edge of a farmer's careful furrow. When storms rattled roof beams and cracks crawled across simple clay walls, some whispered that the giants were turning beneath the earth, pressing their shoulders upward to test Olympus's weight. But above this rumble, the hush of the gods held steady. Kratos and Bia moved as they always had, unflinching, patient force, without anger, yet never soft. While Zeus's thunder cracked open clouds, and Poseidon's trident shook the sea into froth, Kratos braced the lines of lesser gods whose courage flickered like small lamps in a storm. Beside him, Bia's presence was not a shout, but a silent promise pressed into the marrow of every trembling immortal who dared look over the edge of Olympus's bright walls. High above the clash of root and rock and stormlight, Nike hovered, her wings never quite brushing the giant's wild shapes, but close enough that hope trickled down like drifting leaves. Where a god faltered, she settled, featherlight, whispering that triumph remained within reach so long as loyalty did not crack like the mountains below. As the giants fell, some under hills that rolled down in landslides of granite and bramble, some swallowed by seas that hissed and closed over their roars. Mortals shaped stories to remember their restless bones. Even now, they said, a quake that topples stone altars or splits the olive groves might be the sigh of an ancient giant shifting in sleep. A sudden hiss of hot steam from a mountain's hidden mouth might be breath slipping through a giant's clenched teeth. And so, now let us leave the mountains behind, their restless slopes hushed once more by the weight of buried giants, and slip quietly into a darker hush, not the cold hush of iron chains or buried roots, but the soft footfall of vengeance that moves unseen where oaths are broken and blood cries out in silence, where Kratos and Beahode order through force and chains, where Nike lifts the loyal with wings of fleeting triumph. The Furies wait in the shadows, patient, unhurried, humming with the ancient truth that some crimes must answer for themselves. They do not roar or strike in open battle. They drift through silence, carrying a whisper of consequence for those who think power alone can wash away guilt. In dark hollows beneath sacred groves, where no prayers ever reach the clear sky, when a son lifts a hand against his mother, when a brother spills a brother's blood upon a dusty threshold, when an oath sworn on Styx's name is twisted to serve ambition, the Furies wake, not with thunder, not with roaring crowds or gleaming chains, but with soft footfalls that follow the guilty into their dreams, into the hush that falls behind every echoing laugh, into the hush that waits at the edge of sleep. They are not soothed by sacrifice, but by confession, by reckoning, by justice gently weighed and slowly carried out. Even the high gods bow when the Furies gather, for the Furies answer not to Zeus's thunder, but to something deeper, older, the quiet balance that holds family, loyalty, blood, and promise together. They tangled themselves in the mind of Orestes, who fled from his mother's ghost, only to find her shadows stitched to his heels wherever he ran. It was the Furies who insisted that no king, no hero, no child of Zeus would slip the chain of guilt unbound. Their whispers drifted through torchlit rooms where judges listened, where guilt was weighed, not in roaring violence, but in measured words. The Furies weave a final thread, the promise that even power must bow before the quiet voice of consequence. Their footsteps might not echo in a marble temple at midday, yet at night, when the last embers of the hearth gave off a low sigh, people felt the quiet truth of their presence. In a village pressed close to forest's edge, an old woman might hush a restless child with a soft warning. Mind your words, mind your hands, for the Erinyes listen when no one else does. A murderer might wash his stained hands in the cold stream at dawn, yet feel the invisible sting of serpent hair brushing his shoulders, the hush of feet trailing him across hillsides he once roamed freely. Unlike Kratos, whose strength pressed rebellion into chains, or Bia, whose force braced trembling knees in battle, the Furies wielded no blade of bronze or iron. Their weapon was time, patient, soft-footed time that tangled guilt into restless dreams, knotted secrets into half-whispered confessions that spilled out under moonlight when the burden grew too heavy to bear alone. Instead, they waited wherever oaths frayed, beneath the threshold stones of proud houses, behind the closed doors of councils where men bargained away promises made under brighter skies, spilled in the name of vengeance and tangled kinship. The Furies drifted after him like the shadow of his own heartbeat. They slipped into his dreams, not roaring but whispering, soft as rustle of dry leaves across marble floors. And so they changed shape to no longer only hunters, but Eumenides, the kindly ones, guardians of a hush that could soothe old grudges with fair judgment spoken aloud. In this way, the Furies reminded gods and mortals alike that force alone could not hold a kingdom together. Chains, rust, thunder drifts away on summer winds, but consequence, softly carried, remains. In the hush of everyday life, their presence was woven into small customs, a doorframe marked to ward off betrayal, a whispered blessing as a child crossed the threshold of a house where ancient wrongs still clung to hearthstones. In the hush before sleep, a mother might murmur a soft plea to the unseen Furies to keep her family's bonds unbroken, to guard her children's dreams from guilt they had not yet earned. And so, tonight, as your own breath settles and your thoughts drift slowly from this ancient hush to your own small comforts, imagine the Furies not as frightful shapes at the edge of your bed, but as a reminder, quiet, unblinking, that promises matter, that some truths carry themselves soft-footed through every generation, that somewhere always a hush waits to catch what thunder and chains cannot hold. Now, from the shadows where the Furies drift like soft-footed ghosts, let us step into another kind of hush, one that does not hunt the hidden crime alone, but watches the swelling shape of pride, the quiet hunger for too much. Her name is Nemesis, and though her name has survived into your modern tongue as punishment alone, the Greeks knew her as something more delicate: balance, the hush that answers excess with a subtle correction, as certain as a scale settling after its last weight is placed. Nemesis is not thunder or chain or serpent hair whispering in the night. She does not drag the guilty through stony halls or bind them to icy mountains. Instead, she stands at the edge of triumph and ambition, a quiet shape, half seen, half felt, a presence that reminds you that no mortal should reach too high without offering something back to the hush beneath the stars. In old stories, Nemesis moves gently through moments when humans forget the softness of humility. She watches the victor who lifts his head too far above the crowd, the proud hero whose name is spoken too many times under festival garlands. She watches kings who forget their clay feet when the golden cups are raised too high. When she moves, she does not shatter crowns or crumble temples in a single blow. Instead, she plants the quiet seed of consequence, a slight turn of fate, a gentle nudge that topples an empire's highest stone with the brush of a fingertip. No roar, no thunder, only the hush that follows when applause dies and a proud heart realizes it must bow again to the world's patient balance. The Greeks understood her presence in their daily lives too. Not only kings, but farmers and merchants felt her breath in the hush between greed and need. A fisherman who bragged too loudly of nets always full might find the sea strangely empty the next dawn. A merchant who pressed his scales too boldly might find the road home unexpectedly rough, the path washed out by a quiet, punishing storm. Some temples held small altars to Nemesis, not grand marble halls, but humble stones where a single sprig of laurel or a sliver of bread might be left behind as a whispered promise to stay within one's measure. To the poets, she was sometimes winged, like Nike, but where Nike lifted the deserving skyward, Nemesis pulled gently downward, reminding all that the ground is never far away. And in the hush of old myths, she sometimes worked alongside the Furies, quiet sisters in the same dim corridors where blood and pride twist into knots that must be unknotted, softly but surely. If the Furies were the hush that waited after crime, Nemesis was the hush that came before, a caution before arrogance bloomed too wide, before triumph forgot its roots. Even the gods, wrapped in thunder and force, knew her well. Zeus himself, crowned in stormlight, watched Nemesis carefully, for even he, who flung titans down and pressed giants into restless sleep beneath mountains, understood that power unmeasured invites its own undoing. He did not worship Nemesis, but he respected her hush, the soft pressure of balance that kept Olympus standing tall without tipping too far into ruin. So tonight, as your breath drifts steady in the darkness, imagine Nemesis not as wrath, but as the soft hand that levels a tilted cup, the hush that catches your loftiest dreams and reminds them they are better for having roots in the quiet soil below. A whisper that too much, left unchecked, topples itself, and that somewhere, beyond the marble halls and old mythic names, balance waits with patient eyes. Stay here a little longer in this hush where Nemesis drifts, not a roar, not a chain, not a storm, breaking mountains apart, but a breath between a boast and its gentle correction. In old Greece, her presence felt closer than marble temples or thunder rolling over distant hills. She was not a god who demanded grand shrines of gold. She preferred small offerings, a coin pressed into earth beneath an olive tree, a whispered promise to keep one's share modest, one's name spoken with care. Two villagers, whose fields stretched dusty and thin under a fierce sun. Nemesis was a quiet boundary between hunger and greed. A shepherd who claimed too loudly that his flock would double each season might wake to find wolves at the edge of his pastures, not because Nemesis wished ruin, but because she reminded all who live close to the soil that nature has her own hush, her own measure, her own balance that asks respect in return. In bustling port towns, where merchants haggled over amphorae of oil and fragrant spice, Nemesis walked unseen between scales and ledgers. A man who tipped his weights to claim more than his honest share might find the next storm crueler than the last. The winds whispering reminders that the sea too holds a hush of balance no cunning bargain can bribe. Among kings and warriors, her touch was sharper, but still soft-footed. She did not strike with thunderbolts. That was Zeus's domain. She waited instead for hubris to puff the chest too wide, for the voice to rise one boast too high above the hush of listening crowds. And then she moved, a twist of fate, a slip of footing, a loyal ally's quiet betrayal. A spear glancing not off bronze, but striking where pride left an opening. Poets sometimes called her Adrastea, she from whom none can escape. Yet there was no terror in her steps, only the hush that reminds all things what shape they must keep to stand upright. In painted vases she appears serene, a woman calm-faced, holding a measuring rod, sometimes a bridle, sometimes a small wheel to show that what rolls too fast must slow. If you were to stand before her modest altar, perhaps tucked in the shadow of a larger temple to Zeus, you would find no grand marble statue, maybe just a simple stone, worn by time and the touch of quiet hands. Here a passing traveler might leave a sprig of rosemary, a nod that he knew his fortune was only partly his own. Here a mother might murmur a prayer that her children's future grow strong, but not so wild that Nemesis must trim it back with a soft, unseen hand. She moved through the hearth, to the hush at the family table, when a father's voice grew too proud of harvests won, when a son's stories of hunting foxes and wild goats grew too sharp-edged with bravado. Somewhere in the flicker of the fire, her hush reminded them that every mouthful eaten tonight must be repaid tomorrow, with honest labor under an honest sky. Even the gods, bright with power, could feel her hush coil around their shining deeds. She drifted behind Apollo's golden bow, behind Athena's calm eyes, behind Zeus's iron thunder, never to overthrow, only to whisper when they leaned too far toward excess. For no marble hall, no laurel crown, no chain forged by Hephaestus could stand if the world's quiet balance was left to rot in the shadow of unchecked pride. So tonight, as you lie beneath your own quiet ceiling, remember Nemesis not as doom, but as a hush that helps each life find its right shape. A shape that stands steady through storms and sunlight alike. A soft reminder that enough is often plenty and more, if left wild and untended, becomes its own punishment carried gently back to earth. In the hush that settles around you now, feel her passing, a calm breath in the dark, a promise that pride, when tended wisely, grows roots deep enough to hold your world upright. Now drift with me away from fields and quiet thresholds and into the warm, dim hush of a forge hidden on Olympus's slopes, or deep beneath a smoking volcano where stone chambers pulse red with breath and sweat. Here waits Hephaestus, the quiet artisan of the gods, who shapes thunder and punishment alike with hammer and flame. Unlike Kratos and Bia, whose strength and force come from the hush of unbending will, Hephaestus's power is softer, the steady hush of metal under hammer, the soft hiss of water when hot iron is plunged into its cooling bath. Among the Olympians, he is not crowned in laurel or draped in silks. He is bent at the shoulder, hands calloused, eyes steady under a brow furrowed by patient work. His forge is never still. Coals glow like hidden embers of captured lightning. Sparks leap up and die away in the darkness like fleeting stars. On an anvil blackened by centuries of work, Hephaestus shapes gifts and bindings alike. Shields that shimmer in moonlight. Delicate jewelry for goddesses who whisper soft requests at the edges of his chamber. And, when Zeus demands it, chains meant to silence defiance forever. It was Hephaestus who forged the chains that bound Prometheus to the lonely crag, where Kratos and Bia did what pity could not finish. His hammer shaped the iron that clamped around immortal wrists that hummed with Styx's hush of unbreakable promise. And though he struck each blow as ordered, the old poets say his hands did not move eagerly. For Hephaestus knew the hush of force could be cruel when wielded too bluntly. He too knew what it meant to fall. Thrown from Olympus once, cast down through the blue sky for daring to stand too close to a quarrel between Zeus and Hera. Hephaestus landed in the hush of crashing waves and rocky shores. Some say the sea foam caught him. Some say the island's soft sands broke his fall. But from that fall, he rose with a limp that never quite healed, a reminder that even divine hands can be bent and scarred by those they serve. Yet he returned when called, not for Zeus alone, but for his own quiet pride in craft, for the hush of iron that hums beneath thunder, the shape that holds wild power in check. In his forge, no one shouts, no boisterous feasts break the steady rhythm of hammer on metal. Only the soft crackle of coals, the hiss of quenching water, the hush of the gods' secrets hidden in bronze and gold. Mortals loved him differently than they did Zeus's thunder or Athena's sharp wisdom. To blacksmiths in smoky village sheds, Hephaestus was the steady hand behind every glowing horseshoe, every nail bent straight, every humble plowshare that turned dry soil under an honest sun. They whispered his name when the bellows blew red and sparks danced across their arms like bright insects at dusk. They knew that in every chain and blade and shining ornament there lies the hush of iron's soft promise, to bind, to protect, to hold fast what must not slip away. Even now, the old myths linger, when a hammer strikes an anvil in the night, when iron sings in the hush between each measured blow. So tonight, as you breathe in the hush of your own warm room, imagine the forge's glow, sparks drifting up like fleeting stars before they fade back into the dark. Picture Hephaestus, patient and bent, but never broken, tending that steady fire, shaping thunder into something that can be held, punishment into something that binds, yet keeps the world's wild heart from tearing free. And know that in the hush of every chain, from Prometheus's lonely bonds to the iron that holds old titans down in the dark, there hums the soft, steady promise of a smith's careful hand. Stay a little longer by this quiet forge, where the hiss of cooling iron and the steady ring of hammer on anvil form a lullaby older than temples, older than thunder, older even than Olympus's first marble steps. In this hush, Hephaestus works alone, but never without purpose, each spark rising into the darkness like a fleeting thought before drifting back to ash. Picture the forge as the poets imagined it, deep in a hidden cavern, or tucked within the smoking mouth of a restless volcano. Its walls are streaked with soot and iron dust. Tools hang in patient rows, tongs and hammers, chisels worn smooth by centuries of careful hands. Here the hush is warm, not cold like Kratos's iron grip or Bia's forceful push. It is the hush of honest labor, the calm that comes when a shape takes form beneath steady, deliberate strikes. Even the other gods, bright and gleaming in their finery, respect this hush. They come with requests carried on polite whispers, a new shield for a hero's arm, a chariot wheel spun to carry dawn across the sky, a delicate clasp for a goddess's flowing hair. And when they leave, Hephaestus remains, sleeves dark with soot, beard brushed with ash, hands steady as ever. His craft is more than chains and weapons. It is the soft promise that iron, once bent and shaped with care, can hold wildness in check. His forge does not roar, it murmurs. The bellows breathe in and out like a living thing. The coals glow deep orange and gold, not harsh and glaring, but warm as dusk settling over a quiet hillside. To mortals, Hephaestus was a distant god, yet close in ways the bright thunderer could never be. The blacksmith pounding out a blade beneath a thatched roof knew the hush of iron by heart. The potter shaping a metal rim for a fragile jar felt the same warmth in his palm that glowed in the cavern of the god's smith. The farrier fitting a horseshoe at dawn called on Hephaestus with every ring of his hammer, trusting that the god of iron knew the weight of work done slowly and true. Some stories say that when Hephaestus first returned to Olympus after his long fall, he brought with him not thunder or punishment, but gifts shaped by hands that knew what it meant to break and to mend. He crafted thrones for the gods, seats that hummed softly beneath their weight, each curve and hinge a hush of iron that whispered. Even power must sit gently when iron remembers who holds it together. When Prometheus's chains cooled on the anvil, they carried this same hush, not cruel for cruelty's sake, but iron-shaped to hold a lesson, that fire, once stolen, must cost something. And even in punishment, the steady hum of Hephaestus's craft reminded the gods that force alone is nothing without shape, without boundary, without the patient hush of iron to keep it from turning wild again. Yet, for all his service, the smith never boasted. He knew his place, not at the feasts where goblets overflowed, not among the marble columns where the poets sang the thunderer's praises. His place was here by the coals, sleeves rolled back, hammer lifted and lowered in an endless, gentle rhythm that sang in soft sparks and hissed in steam as hot metal met cold water. So, tonight, as you lie within your own hush, imagine this forge, the glow on stone walls, the soft tap and strike, the warmth that hums through hammer and anvil alike. Picture Hephaestus pausing to wipe his brow with a soot-dark cloth, then lifting his head to study a chain, a shield, a gift made not to dazzle, but to hold the world in place. In the hush of that forge, strength becomes shape, thunder finds its handle, rebellion finds its binding, and you, warm in your quiet room, can drift off knowing that somewhere, in old story or hidden dream, the hush. Now let us walk softly into another kind of chain, one that clangs not with iron links but rolls with the hush of stone against rough earth, echoing endlessly beneath a patient sky. Here waits Sisyphus, king of clever words, trickster of the underworld, whose defiance earned him a punishment quieter than thunder, yet heavier than any chain Hephaestus could forge. In life, Sisyphus was not the strongest nor the bravest, but the sharpest, a man who weighed words like coins and turned oaths inside out to serve his restless wit. He outwitted other kings, tricked travelers into doing his bidding, and once, in stories softly told around clay hearths, even outwitted Thanatos' death himself. They say when death came for Sisyphus, the king welcomed him with feigned courtesy and smooth promises. He offered a seat, a cup of wine, a chance to rest his weary bones beside the palace hearth. But beneath that warmth was a snare, iron chains hidden behind honeyed words, and so Sisyphus bound death, shackled him in plain sight, locking away the hush that follows every final breath. For a time, no one died. Soldiers fell on dusty battlefields, only to rise again, blinking under the harsh sun. Old women gasped in their sleep, only to wake with startled hearts still beating. The hush of ending, which keeps the world in balance, vanished. And even Zeus felt the weight of this imbalance pressing at the edges of his thunder. So death was freed, and Sisyphus was dragged down at last. Yet even then, he slipped the hush once more. He told Persephone that his body had not been properly buried, that his wife had neglected the rites. With gentle words and false regret, he convinced the Queen of Shadows to let him walk the world above again, only to linger in sunlight and fresh air, clinging to the hush of freedom with every breath. But Zeus, who forgave many things, could not let such cunning stand forever. For the world's hush depends on limits, and Sisyphus's tricks threaten the hush that separates the living from the dead, the oath from the lie, the hush that Kratos and Biagard with iron and force. And so, when the king was captured at last, he was bound not with bronze chains or burning thunder, but with a quiet, endless task. He was given a single stone, broad as a mill wheel, cold and rough beneath his scarred palms, and a hill that never quite surrendered its peak. Imagine him now, beneath a sky that never changes, his feet pressed into loose earth, his shoulders braced against the round, unyielding hush of that stone. He pushes upward, step by step, breath by breath. The stone rolls with soft grating, a whisper of weight against the slope. And when his arms strain, when sweat slides into his eyes and the summit nears, the stone slips from his grasp. Slowly, it rolls back down the hill's quiet spine, settling once more at his feet. There is no roar here, no crack of thunder or hiss of flame, just the hush of effort, undone and begun again. A lesson shaped not by chain or punishment alone, but by the soft, patient truth that some defiance cannot be met with force, only with repetition. To the Greeks, Sisyphus's stone was more than punishment. It was a mirror for all who push against the hush of limits, a reminder that cleverness untethered from balance drifts back into the hush of consequence. In this myth, Kratos' chain is replaced by the stone's slow circle, Bia's force by the weight of gravity itself. Tonight, as you breathe softly beneath your own warm hush. Imagine him there still, shoulders bent, hands firm on cold rock, each step a small defiance turned quietly into surrender. And know that in the world the Greeks built from thunder and whisper alike, not every punishment is loud. Some echo gently forever, a single stone rolling up and down beneath a sky that watches, silent and unchanged. Linger here a while longer on this lonely slope, where no grass takes root, no birds circle overhead, where the air hums not with thunder, but with the slow scrape of stone over dry earth. Here Sisyphus labors in a hush deeper than any chain's cold bite, a hush shaped not by iron, but by the patient turning of the world beneath his feet. Imagine his hands, roughened now by countless climbs, palms worn shiny where the stone's edges press against flesh. His tunic clings to his back, damp from effort that never knows rest. There are no guards to watch him, no Kratos to stand behind his shoulder, barking orders, no Baia to press him onward with an unspoken shove. His punishment is quieter than that, a pact struck with gravity and slope, the silent, unwavering rule that what is pushed must slip back when pride has spent itself. Each morning, or what passes for morning in this place where no sun rises or sets, Sisyphus curls his fingers around the cold curve of the stone's base. He braces his shoulder, digs his heels into dusty ground, and begins. At first, the climb feels almost light, the stone rolling obediently a few paces at a time. Hope flickers, brief and bitter. Perhaps today the peak will hold. Perhaps the hush will break. But the slope steepens. The stone leans against him, like an old enemy leaning closer with every breath. The hush thickens, not cruel, not kind, only certain. And when the crest nears, when the stone trembles, as if it might settle into place, a breath of wind, a slip of gravel, and the hush reclaims it. Down it rolls, slow at first, then faster, the rumble muffled by centuries of repetition, until it settles once more at the hill's base. To the Greeks, this soft cycle was more than punishment. It was a mirror held up to mortal lives. They saw in Sisyphus's sweat and strained shoulders the endless tasks of their own days. Fields plowed and replowed, harvests gathered only to be eaten and sown again, water drawn from the well that must always be drawn again tomorrow. They knew, too, that cleverness, when it outruns humility, invites its own slow hush in return. Yet they did not despise Sisyphus. Some even pitied him. Some admired the stubborn flicker of defiance that lives in each climb. For in each push of the stone there is a spark of choice, the faint echo of the trickster who once bound death in iron chains and slipped free of the hush that waits for every living thing. At night, when farmers laid down their tools beside quiet hearths, they might murmur that Sisyphus's stone kept the balance firm, that his endless effort softened the anger of Zeus, that in the hush between rolling stone and resting shoulder, the world found room to breathe without fear of Now follow me down from Sisyphus's lonely hill to a quieter grove, half in sunlight, half in shade, where clear water laps gently at bare ankles, and branches bend under the weight of heavy fruit, pears, figs, pomegranates, brushed with deep crimson and gold. Here stands Tantalus, forever waiting, forever wanting, a king whose cunning left him bound, not with chains, but with an endless hush of longing. In life, Tantalus was not poor. He sat at grand tables, feasted among the gods themselves. Zeus once welcomed him to Olympus's golden feasts, a rare favor for a mortal king. The poets say he spoke with gods as a guest, his wine cup filled by divine hands, his table spread with food richer than any mortal harvest could offer. Yet within him stirred the same pride that Kratos's iron and Nemesis's hush were born to watch. Tantalus could not keep the secrets whispered over cups of ambrosia. He stole what was sacred. Nectar slipped from the god's table into mortal hands, and worse still, when his arrogance grew too wide for any hush to hold, he tested the gods' sight with a cruel trick, inviting them to a banquet where what lay upon the platter was his own son, hidden beneath sauces and spices meant to deceive divine senses. In this world shaped by thunder and hush, betrayal blooms quietly but echoes forever. Zeus saw through the deception. The gods recoiled from the unthinkable feast, and Tantalus, once fed by Olympus's bounty, found himself stripped of favor, cast down into a punishment that would hum through eternity, a lesson woven softly into each drop of water and each trembling leaf. Imagine him now, standing knee-deep in a clear pool. Cool water curls around his calves, rising just high enough to kiss dry lips. But when he bends to drink, the hush stirs. The pool slips away, retreating like breath drawn back into the earth, leaving only the soft rasp of thirst beneath a sun that never burns but never cools. Above him, branches bow under fruit, so ripe the skin glows with promise. He reaches, the hush answers. The branches lift just beyond his grasp. The fruit sways, brushing his fingertips, close enough to taste with the mind, but never with the tongue. And so he stands, hunger and thirst wrapped around him like the hush of Kratos's chain. Aias, push, Nemesis's soft correction, a binding knot of iron but of want. To the Greeks, Tantalus's grove was more than a tale of cruelty. It reminded them that betrayal poisons not with thunder, but with a quiet echo that hums beneath every mouthful of food freely given. They saw in him the hush that guards every meal, the unspoken promise that what is shared in trust must not be twisted for pride. Mothers whisper the story softly as children lean drowsy at the hearth. Be grateful for bread still warm from the oven, for water drawn cool from the well. For even kings who dine with gods may find themselves drifting in a hush where every bite slips through their fingers, where every sip drains away before it soothes the tongue. And so tonight, as you drift toward your own dreams, imagine Tantalus still, standing in that hush of clear water and ripening fruit, arms half lifted, throat dry, a quiet shape caught between want and the soft reminder that betrayal, once offered to the god's table, echoes back forever in ripples, too subtle for thunder to silence. Stay here a little longer beneath these dappled leaves, where sunlight pools on still water and shadows slip across Tantalus's quiet prison. See him stand there, half ghost, half king, the hush of his punishment woven into each breath that never truly quenches his thirst. When you listen closely, you can almost hear the soft swirl of the pool, the way the water curls around his ankles, cool as early spring before drifting away. He bends to drink, palms cupped like a beggar's bowl, lips parted for relief. But just as the hush touches his throat, the water sighs backward, slipping through his fingers into the roots of unseen trees. The hush fills the empty space where water once waited, patient and unmoved. He lifts his head. Overhead, branches heavy with fruit sway on a wind that does not touch his skin. Figs soft as velvet, pears pale gold, dappled with sun. Pomegranates split just enough to show their red promise within. When he reaches up, his fingers brush the skin, warm, real, close enough to imagine biting through, feeling the burst of sweetness against his tongue. But the hush answers here too. The branch lifts just so. The fruit dances out of reach. His fingers curl around empty air. The leaves settle back into place, rustling softly, like a mother's hush to a restless child. To those who told his story, this was not just cruel delight, but a whisper of balance, a reminder that trust and gift must move together like water and root. The gods who once fed Tantalus at their sacred table asked only that he hold their secrets, respect their hush, but in betraying it, in laying a son's body upon a platter to test divine sight, he cracked the hush wide open, and so it wrapped around him again, not with thunder, but with quiet need left always unanswered. In village homes, children once dozed to sleep by the hearth, as parents spoke his name like a caution folded into lullaby. Be mindful of what you share. Be grateful for what you are given. Taste your bread slowly, your water fully, for there are shapes in the old world who hunger forever because they forgot how to sit humbly at the table. And so Tantalus lingers here, day after day that does not truly end, night that does not truly come. He stands, half submerged in the hush of want. He lifts his hands, lowers them again. The water trembles forward and backward. The fruit bows down, sighs upward. There is no thunder, no roar, no rattle of iron or flash of Zeus's lightning here. Only the soft, steady hush that hums you betrayed the gift. You may see it forever, but never taste it again. Tonight, as you listen in the hush of your own room, imagine a single drop of that water brushing Tantalus's dry lip before slipping away. Imagine one pomegranate seed pressed just close enough to taste its sweetness in memory alone. And know that in this world, shaped by thunder, chains, and whispers, betrayal blooms quiet consequences that linger long after the banquet has grown cold. And so Tantalus waits, king with no throne, guest at a feast that never feeds him. Now let us step away from quiet water and heavy branches to stand, for a moment, in the hush that gathers when dawn has not yet broken over a field marked by war. Here the air is still, a hush held between shallow breaths and cold metal, and within that hush drift the cares, the ancient spirits of violent death. To the Greeks, the cares were not goddesses who ruled from marble halls. They did not dine with Zeus or brush shoulders with heroes in polished armor. They belonged to the hush that slips through cracks in shields, that hums along spear points before they strike bone, that settles over a battlefield like mist when the shouting stops and the dust hangs in the early light. They are not loud. They do not roar like thunder or shriek like harpies. Instead, the cares drift where the wounded gasp, where the dying turn their faces to earth that does not answer. They are the hush that follows a final heartbeat, not the soft hush of peaceful passing in a warm bed, but the sharper hush of life cut short by iron and ambition. In old poems, the cares were painted as shadows, with wings black as ravens' feathers. Some said their fingers dripped with the hush of spilled life, not described in harsh detail, but known in the way soldiers lowered their eyes when the word was spoken. They slipped through tents at night, brushing sleeping brows that would not wake again once dawn's horn sounded. They perched above phalanx walls when shields locked tight, when feet dug into trampled grass, waiting for the first clash to break the hush apart. Yet the cares were not only horror, they were balance too. The whisper that every choice to lift a blade carried a consequence, waiting quietly behind the swing. They drifted through stories told beside old campfires, where warriors checked their spearheads by the hush of flickering flame. Each man knew that somewhere among the ranks of clashing bronze, a shadow might be drifting already, brushing his shoulder with a hush that promised only silence. Kratos and Bia held force and strength in open daylight, pressing rebellion down with iron and chains. But the cares moved where force could not reach, in the space where courage faltered, where no chain could bind a blow once it was struck. Even Zeus, whose thunder cracked mountains apart, could not call them back once they had brushed a name in the hush before dawn. Picture them now, drifting through an old battlefield at first light. Shields lie overturned, spears thrust into the damp soil like fallen branches. Beneath the hush of waking birds, the cares move softly among the forms that do not rise again. There is no roar here, no wailing lament, only the hush that hums between the living and the ground that gently gathers what remains. To the Greeks, these spirits were a reminder that violence, once called forth, brings its own quiet watchers, that no cry for victory goes unanswered by the hush that follows every clash of blade on bronze. And so, when a mother pressed a charm into her son's palm before he left for war, when an old priest sprinkled cool water on a spear's point, they did so in the hope that the cares might drift past in silence, looking elsewhere for the hush they craved. Tonight, as you rest, far from shield walls and dark-winged shadows, remember that the cares are not here to wake you, but to remind you. Even thunder and chain, even the hush of unbreakable oaths, must bow to the soft balance that violence carves out for itself. In every story of glory and bright armor, a hush waits behind the noise, a hush that drifts quiet as a final breath across a field where dawn will come, soft and patient, whether the battle rages or the world stands still. Stay here a moment longer, among the hush of broken shields and damp grass, where the dawn has yet to push its first soft gold across the world. Feel how the air holds its breath, how even the wind pauses as it moves through shattered spears and dented helms, left behind in the night's uneasy quiet. In the hush between footfalls, the cares drift, patient shapes that know when the time has come to gather what war always leaves behind. In the old myths, they were sisters, not beautiful, not cruel, but necessary. Wings darker than crows, eyes clear as midnight pools. When poets spoke their names by hearth or campfire, the words fell low and careful, as if to name them too boldly was to invite them closer. Some believed they were born from the same hush that shapes night itself, older than the bright armor of heroes, older even than Zeus's thunder. For every roar of battle, every clash of bronze on bronze, there must come a hush that gathers the breath that was lost. The cares are that hush given form. When soldiers stood in tight ranks before a charge, eyes flicking left and right to find the courage that trembles at the edge of fear, they might glimpse something at the corner of vision, a shadow slipping between spear tips, a whisper of wings in the hush that hangs between heartbeat and command. They knew then that some would not return to see olive groves heavy with fruit, children running barefoot through dust, wives lifting lamps to guide them home. To mothers who watched their sons march away, the cares were not demons alone. They were the hush that made prayers necessary. A mother's hush at the door before dawn, a soft hand pressed to a helmet's cheek strap, the breath held as hoofbeats faded. In that hush lived hope that the cares might drift past in mercy, that their wings might fold quietly over distant fields and not circle back with whispers of a son's name woven into the hush of burial rites. Even kings, who gathered armies with promises of bright glory, felt the hush of the cares drift behind their banners, for they knew that no matter how bright a spear point gleamed in sunlight, no matter how many prayers lifted to Zeus for thunderous favor, the cares lingered at the far edge of victory, waiting to gather what all battles spill into the waiting earth. Some storytellers said the cares did not delight in blood, nor did they hunger for pain. They were the balance that force alone could not control, the hush that teaches that power wielded with pride must answer to the quiet breath that leaves a warrior's chest when the clash has ended. In the hush that follows a battle, you can almost hear them, the soft brush of wings among grass bent low, the whisper of sandals slipping across cold bronze. They lift no thunder, forge no chains, demand. Let us leave behind the hush of spears resting in quiet fields, and step instead into the shaded doorways of old temples, places where the hush hums, not with wings or iron, but with breath and whispered words, woven into the dark folds of incense and flickering oil lamps. Here wait the oracles, the voices of Zeus's will made soft enough to slip into the minds of kings, warriors, and shepherds alike. Unlike Kratos's iron grip or Bia's unyielding force, Zeus's power stretched into the hush of thought, a power that held hearts and choices together by a promise half glimpsed in riddles. In Delphi, where a cleft in the earth breathed strange vapors through cool rock, the Pythia sat cloaked in laurel and quiet awe. Mortals traveled dusty roads for weeks or months, carrying coins, goats, or golden bracelets as humble offerings. They stepped into the hush of the temple's belly, stone walls, damp with the earth's old breath, and knelt before a woman whose words shaped the hush into secrets no thunderbolt could strike down. Picture it. A king kneels, armor creaking, a crown polished too brightly for this soft, smoky place. He dares to lift his eyes to a figure veiled in linen and shadows. Her lips part, her voice drifts out, not loud, not commanding, but like a hush that slips under the skin and burrows deep. Her words tumble in riddles that twist like ivy. You will conquer if the sun stands still. Your home will stand if the snake sleeps beneath its root. Beware the wooden wall that bleeds. No chain binds him here. No giant roars. No Kratos grips his shoulder. Yet in this hush, choices are forged as surely as Hephaestus shapes iron on his anvil. The king leaves, changed, carrying the hush within him, reshaping armies, treaties, the lives of thousands, because one soft riddle hums behind his every waking thought. The Greeks knew that Zeus did not rule by thunder alone. His voice slipped through the hush of the oracles, drifting from Delphi to Dodona, where oak leaves whispered secrets in the wind. Priests and priestesses listened to that hush, to the sigh of branches, the tremble of leaves that touched no mortal hand, and turned the soft hush into truths that guided harvests and marriages, voyages across dark seas and wars waiting just beyond the horizon. For common folk, the oracles were a hush of hope, too. A shepherd whose flock grew thin beneath a restless sky might stand at a shrine's edge, murmuring questions. Will the rains return? Will my children see next spring? In return, he received no thunderbolt or iron bond, only a hush that left room for faith to grow where answers cannot be forced. This was Zeus's gentlest chain, the hush of possibility, wrapped in words that drift through the mind long after the temple gates close behind the questioner's steps, a promise that the world's chaos, thunderous and wild, might be held gently in place by a few soft words spoken in a hush too deep to see. And yet, the oracles reminded mortals too that knowledge carries its own hush of consequence. For many who came seeking certainty found only riddles that doubled back on themselves like a river's dark bend. A king who trusted too fiercely might fall because the hush hid truth in plain sight. A peasant who mistrusted every word might find his life drifting like a boat unmoored. Tonight, as you rest, picture that temple carved into a hillside of olive trees, its stones cool beneath drifting veils of smoke. Hear the hush of the Pythia's voice, not telling you what must be done, but reminding you that sometimes the softest whisper shapes more of the world than thunder or chain ever could. In this hush of sleep, know that even the strongest rule needs riddles too. A soft voice to drift through minds like yours, carrying possibility folded gently within the hush. Stay a little longer in this hush, where footsteps echo on cool temple stones, where distant voices murmur prayers behind drifting smoke. Here, the oracles weave Zeus's will not in thunderclaps, but in soft, looping riddles that settle into the hearts of those bold enough or desperate enough to kneel and listen. Imagine Delphi now, a sacred path winding upward through olive groves that sigh in the dry wind. Pilgrims climb slow and careful, feet dusty, shoulders bent beneath baskets of offerings. They pause beside the sacred spring, splashing cold water on tired faces, whispering their questions into the hush that hums beneath old stone lintels. Above them, the temple's columns catch the sun like quiet pillars of flame, rising to touch the sky where Zeus's eye drifts unseen. Inside, the Pythia waits. She sits above the chasm that breathes sweet and heavy, the old earth's sigh curling around her ankles. Laurel leaves tremble in her fingers, and smoke coils upward, not harsh, but soft as a drifting thought. Her mouth opens, and the hush spills out, a string of words that do not bind, do not command, yet slip inside like seeds tucked beneath dark soil. Outside, kings stand shoulder to shoulder with farmers and traders. A general waits for the hush to guide his campaign. A young woman seeks a whisper to steady her fear of childbearing. A sailor cups his hands around an olive twig, hoping the hush will keep his boat safe as it drifts past Poseidon's hidden rocks. The oracle's words float outward, riddles shaped like gentle snares. You will win if you lose. The path is clear if the stone is heavy. Trust the wolf when the flock scatters. Each riddle hums in the mind of the listener, growing roots in his sleep, tangling itself into his plans and prayers long after he leaves the hush of stone behind. And beyond Delphi, other voices whisper too at Dodona, where sacred oaks stand older than many temples. The hush of Zeus's hidden promise trembles in rustling leaves. Priests listen not for a booming voice, but for the small hush of branches brushing one another, the quiet gossip of doves that nest among dark boughs. There is no chain here, no iron clasp to bind wrist or ankle, only the hush that hums. Listen, wonder, fear, hope. To the Greeks, this hush was proof that Zeus's reach needed no thunderbolt to strike down every doubt. It reminded them that the world is shaped as much by the soft murmur that follows a question as by the roar that answers it outright. In distant fields where shepherds tend flocks under drifting stars, the hush of the oracle drifts too. A rumor told by a passing traveler becomes a new vow beneath an old olive tree. We will wait one more season. We will sow. And now, let us settle at last into the softest hush of all. The hush where every chain finds its quiet echo, where thunder hums itself to silence, where every riddle and shadow drifts into sleep. Across this night's slow telling, you have walked among iron and storm, Kratos' steady grip pressing rebellion into shape, Bia's unseen force bracing knees that might buckle in the hush of fear. You have felt the flick of Nike's wings, lifting hearts just high enough to taste victory. The hush of Styx's dark water binding oaths so deep that even Zeus bows his bright head before them. You have stood at the mountain's lonely peak beside Prometheus, the titan who dared to carry fire where only shadows shivered. You have heard the hush of giants shifting in restless dreams beneath ancient soil, felt Nemesis's soft breath against pride grown too wide, heard the cares drift among fallen spears and broken helms. When the thunder faded away, you have touched the hush of the forge, where Hephaestus's hammer sings iron into shape, chain, crown, gift, punishment, all humming with the same promise that what is bound holds the world steady for a while longer. And you have stood knee-deep beside Tantalus's clear pool, fruit brushing your lips only to slip away, a hush that reminds all who reach too far that betrayal leaves hunger humming beneath branches that never break. You walked among the cares, drifting on wings soft as dusk, gathering the hush that slips between final breaths on battlefields forgotten by the next dawn's bright call. You knelt before oracles who spoke Zeus's mind, not in thunder, but in a hush that hummed behind words that twist and guide and echo down the turning corridors of mortal thought. And now, all these hushes gather here at the soft edge of your own breathing. The hush that shaped the old world still hums in yours, a promise whispered in the small hush between heartbeats, a reminder that every oath once spoken binds not with chains but with memory and gentle consequence. Imagine Styx's dark river flowing beneath the bedrock of your mind, cold and patient, carrying every vow you have ever made, every word given in trust. Picture Kratos' hand pressing iron closed, not in anger, but to hold the hush steady when the world grows too loud. Feel Bia's silent push steadying your thoughts, should they drift too wildly away. Sense Nike's faint wings brushing your dreams with promise that tomorrow the hush may lift you high enough to try again. And when pride swells or cunning strains against its bindings, Nemesis lingers near, not cruel, not harsh, but soft, reminding you that enough is often plenty. That balance, like hush, holds us upright when the wind blows harder than we expect. Even the Furies, drifting like shadows behind old mistakes, are here to ease the hush forward, patient hands gathering the frayed edges of what we owe each other and ourselves. Tonight, as your breath slows, you carry every hush with you, the hush of chain and thunder, the hush of quiet rivers and whispering groves, the hush of stone rolling up and down a hill beneath a patient sky. Rest now in this hush, deeper than thunder, softer than any chain, a hush older than fear and force, older than Zeus's bright crown, the hush that comes when the story folds back into itself, when questions find no need for answers, when all the promises made in fire and iron slip back into gentle dark, may this hush hold you steady through the drifting hours. May it soften each thought until your mind drifts clear as Styx's cold current. May you sleep, warm in your own simple vow, that when you wake, you will carry this hush within you, a promise shaped like a breath, gentle and unbroken. Stay just a little longer here, where the hush settles like dusk across an olive grove, where the last embers of old fires drift upward into night, too quiet to remember thunder's roar. Let the hush that has followed you through these old winding myths fold itself around your shoulders,